Oh, a kid in the 1970s, mini bike, lots of paddocks. Basically, we got sent a frame from my uncle, we got a mower engine from somewhere else, me and my brother put it together, and you know, that's how it started. Then later on I got a road licence. Like, you know, back in the 80s it was cheap to ride a motorbike and cars were really expensive. It was purely not because of any overwhelming desire to ride a motorcycle or anything like that. It was kind of like, it was there, it was cheap, it was easy, so I'll do that. So look, the GPZ, it was an old GPZ then, but the big problem with it was chain drive, and back then chains weren't what they are now. So I used to have to tighten the chain every week. I got jack of that after a while, and I went, what motorbikes have got shaft drives? And there were only two. There was Moto Guzzi and there was BMW. And BMW at the time was not in contention because old fellas rode BMWs, and they really didn't look good in comparison to the Moto Guzzi. You know, it was really just that deep. I just liked the look of them, and it turned out that I've had them ever since. There's been a few, only 5 or 6. I'm going to have to go through them. The Mark IV, a V7 racer. I had a V11 green meanie, I used to call it, had the red frame. There's been some others that I can't recall. Having owned this, I would say that this is probably the best Moto Guzzi I've ever owned. It's the one tool that you need. It's a Swiss Army knife of all motorcycling. It's just, does it all. Dirt, roads, hills. If you want to plough a field, you can do that with it as well. It's a Moto Guzzi Quota 1000, so in Australian a Quota 1000. It's not all that common in this country. From what I can gather, there are about 600 made globally between 1992 and 1997. This is a 1996 fuel-injected model. Before that, they were all carburetted. This bike is one of 6 that I can track down that was brought into the country. And the guy that originally owned this bought this bike new from Forcycle in Sydney. He told me that there were 4 Moto Guzzis, 4 of these, on that showroom floor, 2 red ones and what he said 2 black ones, but they never came in black, so I'd say it was the dark green one. And 2 of them were in Perth. Now, of those 6 bikes, through various clubs and that, I know that there's 3 still running in Australia. The others, I've got no idea where they are or if they even exist anymore. Moto Guzzi, the story is that they were contacted by some North African country that needed motorcycles that would do 100 miles an hour, that you could fix on the side of the road and would last for 20 years. That's what they came up with. They're an enormously robust build. They have an enormous spine frame that goes through the middle of them. It's an enormously overbuilt motorcycle for what it is, which contributes to some of its weight, I suppose. It's 230 odd kilos dry. You don't feel that when you're riding it. It's a very nice handling machine. But that's essentially the story of the machine itself. They're not common. I'd never seen one in the flesh, ever. So it kind of found me, I didn't find it. How I came to own this motorcycle, I was happily off doing other motorcycle things at the time. A mate of mine was going to Cape York Peninsula, and he needed a bike to get him there. His, I believe, brother-in-law, who lived up near Canamble in New South Wales, said to him, "I've got just the thing for you, I'll send it to you." The long story is that it had been in a barn or a couple of different barns up in northern New South Wales for about 15 years unstarted. Dave got it down to his place, wasn't willing to sort of invest the time or the effort really into it, but he knew someone who would. So he gave me a ring and he said, "Oh, you're not going to believe what's in my garage." And I said, "Oh, well, what?" He says, "It's a Moto Guzzi." And I said, "Oh yeah, well, you know, what is it?" And he went, "Well, I don't know, I've never seen one before." So that piqued my interest. So I said, "All right, I'll be right over." So when I got there, there's this sad looking thing. It didn't have a dashboard in it, it had no screen. The front mud guard was not the right guard. The side covers were missing. The fuel tank was sort of wobbly, just draped over it. The seat was loose and it was tied up with a bit of rope to the wall holding it so it didn't fall over. So that was my introduction to that. And I said to him, "Oh, you did the right thing there. Like that, there's a lot of work in that, and I know that bike is really hard to get parts for, if you can get any parts at all. And it was, if you like, an unloved child of Moto Guzzi too. So your chances of getting anything really for them is not good. When it was in the barn, as it turns out, some rats decided it'd make a really nice place to live. And so they fed themselves on the wiring. The bike had a couple of nesting sparrows or something like that in the exhaust pipe. So I know all that because when I pulled it apart, we saw the wiring had been roached pretty much. And when we started it the first time, we were sort of revving it up, and then, you know, it goes boom. You go, oh, what was that? And like a whole bird's nest came out of the exhaust pipe. And then we said, oh, well, that'll clear its throat a bit, and we did it again. And then another one came out. The first thing I did was say, no, I don't want it. And then I got thinking, and I started talking to a few blokes, and they said, oh yeah, well, you know, you could probably use this, or you could probably use that, or you could probably... So I started sort of thinking the bike a little bit sideways, as opposed to buying bits and pieces that you could get it, let's say, concours condition. This bike is not that. This bike is put together with various other models of Moto Guzzis. The first thing that I did was see if I could get the important stuff, which were mainly the side covers and the plastics, those sorts of things. And as it turns out, the second time I went back to have a look at this bike in Dave's garage, I said, well, is that it? You know, like the first time it was pretty ordinary. I said, oh no, there's a box of stuff. And in the box of stuff was side covers and all the bits that you actually need. The side covers, the plastics, front fairing, front mudguard, those sorts of things are really hard to find. Some of the 1100 stuff will come across, but because this was kind of a only child in a way with Moto Guzzi, it's kind of weird. It doesn't actually have interconnecting parts that fit with other models in a lot of ways. It's its own frame, it's its own fuel injectors. The only other fuel injector you can get for this bike is in a Lamborghini or a Maserati, and you can only buy them in lots of 12. You know, it's kind of useless or expensive, one or the other. I'd never really stripped down. I've stripped down bikes, not right down to the axles and nuts and bolts and things, but certainly I've pulled apart enough bikes to sort of know my way around how to do that. So I just started taking things off it, photographing things as I went so that I didn't forget, because I knew that it was going to be a fairly long process. What can I find? Where can I find these things? And that journey took me everywhere. There's a guy in Germany, would you believe, who makes reproduction dashboards. The other bits and pieces came from Mario over at Thunder Bikes. People loaned me stuff or gave me stuff. The regulator on the front came from the Motormine. The back gearbox plate that was broken was also given to me by a guy in the Sydney club. The ECU that had been eaten out by rats, I don't know anything about that. I just like, well, here's a blue wire, here's the other blue wire, I'll join those together. So I did that. And so I didn't really expect it to work, to be honest, because the things that I'd done to it, whilst I did them properly and I'd resealed them and lined them and all that sort of stuff, probably shouldn't really work as well as it does. Since it's been restored, it had about 29,000 Ks on it. Sat in a barn for 15 years or thereabouts. I got it 3 or 4 years ago. It's done 30,000 Ks since then. Now, that's testament to the fact that Moto Guzzi builds an extremely robust motorcycle. I've done nothing on the motor. I've done the valve clearances, put oil in it, cleaned it up a bit. Bottom end's exactly as it was the day it rolled out of the showroom, and so is the top end. It hasn't had rings, hasn't had anything done to it. It just had a little rest. They're an amazing bike in that respect because they're probably over-engineered. People kind of laugh at them because they're, you know, they are a bit Stone Age, I suppose, in terms of water-cooled, power-hungry machines these days. But these big block 949 motors are great, and they went in a whole series of bikes, and that's why I knew when I was restoring it that, you know, the Mark V, same motor, different gearing, but probably slightly different internals too, but worst comes to worst, if that motor's no good, I can probably shoehorn another one into it. So it went back together with a lot of help from a lot of people. And that's what sort of makes that bike special in a way, and why it's always a keeper for me, is the story of getting it's pretty amazing. The story of fixing it's also pretty amazing, and since that time some of those guys have ridden it, and you know, so it's become the motorbike that lots of people like to see at places, but it's also something that some of my mates can ride and have a bit of fun with as well. I'm just fascinated by the fact that a bike can be so ignored for so long you can get back on the thing and do as I did and ride it 12,000 Ks in one trip on that bike. It's just a bike that has so much to give. It's not the fastest, it's not the best, but it'll start every time. And if it stops, you can probably fix it. And it'll carry a lot of stuff. And it doesn't care if it's on a dirt road or a tar road or going uphill or downhill. It's just a bike that is moto totale, which is the total motorcycle.
So I love shooting this story with Darrell and his Quota Mille, or as he says, Quota 1000. But check out this video over here with Chris Donaldson, who took his Le Mans on quite an adventure.